What it do? What it do? You know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. Most definitely hit that bell icon. That's the notification bell that alerts you all content that I will drop to my YouTube platform. So you want the latest, the up to date, the current content. You don't want to miss anything that I drop. Make sure you hit the bell icon. It will alert you. It will shoot you the notification to let you know when I drop content to YouTube. Also, make sure you hit the thumbs up, the AKA the like button. YouTube appreciate that. S.L.R Media TV appreciate that. Also, I need you to go spin the block, double back, go to my second YouTube channel, S.L.R Sports News TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment over there. All helps my channel grow, get more viewers, more subscribers, pushes both of my YouTube channels further to the YouTube algorithm to get noticed. So it's very important that you make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you leave a comment too. All helps the channel. Also, you like the content, you like what I do, make sure you hit the Cash App. All information is pinned in at the bottom of the ticker. Appreciate everybody who continue to donate to the channel. Continue to do that. We're going to continue to go to greater heights always. You know what we do over here. Shout out to my subscribers. Shout out to my future subscribers. You see it, we in the building. We in the building. Yeah. Here we go with another episode. Here's another series that I got going on. The war in America. Yeah. Trump versus Iran. Exclusive details. So right now, we in war. Well, we are in war with Iran. And we got a president that really don't know what he want to do. He's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. One minute he wants to attack Iran, next minute he wants to pull out. So basically, he sent J.D. Vance and the team to Pakistan to meet with Iran to, you know what I'm saying, make some type of truce agreements to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran couldn't agree with United States principles, and United States couldn't agree with Iran principles. So it's a standstill, no deal. Donald Trump has announced today that he's pulling a blockade on the Straits of Hormuz on the north and the south. I don't know how he's gonna pull that off, but Monday we could officially be in war with Iran for real, for real. So buckle up. Buckle up. We could officially be in war with Iran starting Monday if Iran can't come to the truth with something with the United States, which Donald Trump has been playing Iran the whole time, and Iran just called Donald Trump out on his bluff, saying, "You've been playing me." So we're going to find out tomorrow who's doing the bluff. Gas prices up, food prices, aluminum, everything's up right now, and America is on Donald Trump top. And I don't know what Donald gonna do, but Donald better do something real fast. But you know what we here for, S.L.R Media TV. We're here to break it down, repackage it up, and out accordingly, and get to the root of cause of why Donald Trump now wants to go out after Iran, after backs it up, ship it out accordingly, and break it down. You know what we do at S.L.R Media TV. We everywhere. We cover all news, topics, social media, entertainment, sports. We're on it. We're on it. We're on it. Let's get into it. Smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Let's go.
Why is the United States suddenly alone in one of the world's most dangerous crises? Because even its closest allies don't want to enter the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries 1/5 of the world's oil, and right now it's effectively blocked. Oil prices are rising.
The war in Iran tonight, President Trump and his threat to attack Iran's key electrical plants. The president is now giving Iran 5 more days, he says, saying the U.S. is now talking with Iran. Iran tonight saying they're not talking. Rachel Scott at the White House.
Tonight, President Trump backing away from his threat to attack Iran's key electrical plants, saying the two countries are now in talks to end the war.
We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement.
But tonight, Iran insists, quote, no talks with the U.S. have taken place, saying any claims to the contrary are aimed at influencing financial and oil markets and distracting from the challenges facing the U.S. and Israel. Over the weekend, the president declared that if Iran did not open the Strait of Hormuz by tonight, the U.S. will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. But President Trump now says he's giving Iran 5 days to make a deal, and that his son-in-law Jared Kushner and Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff are leading the talks. But the president won't say who in Iran they're talking to.
We're dealing with the man who I believe is the most respected and the leader. It's a little tough. We've wiped out everybody.
Is that the Supreme Leader?
No, not the Supreme Leader.
Still, the president telling reporters Iran has already agreed to an array of things.
You said there's many points of agreement with Iran right now.
Many.
What, can you give us a
Many, like 15 points. 15 points.
Iran has said yes.
Well, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. That's number one. That's number 1, 2, and 3. They will never have a nuclear weapon.
They said yes to that?
They've agreed to that.
The president says if a deal happens, the Strait of Hormuz will be open, quote, very soon.
And who's in control of it? Will Iran still be able to control the flow of oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By whom?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control
and
of
the
flow of oil?
Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah. Look, and there'll also be a very serious form of a regime change.
President Trump insists that talks with Iran are underway, but Iran says that is not true, accusing the administration of just trying to calm the markets. What we do know is the president has now set a new deadline 5 days from now, David.
Watching this from the White House tonight, Rachel Scott, thank you.
Overnight, Iran responding to a new deadline from President Trump, who's threatening to bomb Iranian power plants and other infrastructure unless the Strait of Hormuz is opened by tomorrow night. Iran's Navy Command now posting on social media, the Strait of Hormuz will never return to its former state, especially for America and Israel. The response coming hours after President Trump's profanity-laced threat warning, Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one. Trump ordering Iran to, in his words, open the expletive strait, you crazy expletive, or you'll be living in hell. He signed off with the words, praise be to Allah. Trump later telling ABC News, if Iran does not make a deal, we're blowing up the whole country. Experts warn bombing civilian infrastructure could be a war crime.
This could turn into more of what would be a total war. And essentially, there is no target off limits. And that is something that we've tried to avoid since the end of World War II as an international community.
Some Democrats blasting the president.
Donald Trump has gotten us into this reckless war of choice without ever clearly laying out the strategic objectives, the plan, how this is designed to actually make life better for the American people.
Well, some Republicans say it's about time.
If you don't undertake the conflict, if you just step back and watch, as the Obama administration was going to do while Iran became a nuclear power and they became North Korea, we wouldn't be looking at the Strait of Hormuz. We'd be looking at what's, having Europe be at risk.
The heightened rhetoric comes as we learn new details about the rescue of a U.S. airman trapped deep inside Iran. Hundreds of special operations forces carried out the nighttime raid to bring him home. One of two on board an F-15 Strike Eagle shot down Friday. The pilot was rescued in hours. But the weapons systems officer spent more than a day hiding from Iranian forces in a mountain crevice.
This is an incredibly perilous situation. You've got to locate them. You've got to assess their mobility, assess their health status. Are they compromised? Are they, is there any other threats around them?
It was during the mission that the colonel made a brief radio call. President Trump claimed the pilot said, "Power be to God." But a U.S. official now confirms the actual message was, "God is good." Trump says he was initially thrown off by the unusual message, worrying Iran might have been using it to lure U.S. forces into a trap. During the rescue mission, an A-10 Warthog was shot down. That pilot ejected after flying to Kuwait. And 2 U.S. aircraft suffered technical malfunctions and were deliberately destroyed by U.S. troops to avoid them falling into Iranian hands. Meanwhile, Iran and the U.S. have now received a proposal for a 45-day ceasefire that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The proposal is from Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey. No response yet.
This is day 33 of the war with Iran.
We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Tonight, 5 weeks into the war with Iran, President Trump for the first time addressing the nation, touting what he describes as the triumphs of Operation Epic Fury.
Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them, terrorist regime they led, are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak.
The president also addressing the global oil crisis, calling on countries desperate for oil to, quote, take back the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway now effectively in Iran's chokehold.
Go to the Strait and just take it, protect it, use it for yourselves. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done, so it should be easy. And in any event, when this conflict is over, the Strait will open up naturally.
Stating the rising gas prices here in the U.S., now topping $4 a gallon, is only temporary.
Remember, because of our Drill Baby Drill program, America has plenty of gas. We have so much gas. Under my leadership, we are #1 producer of oil and gas on the planet.
Polls showing Americans are eager for this war to end. 60% of Americans disapprove of this military operation, and 2/3 say the U.S. should work to end this conflict quickly. The president saying in the meantime, discussions are ongoing, and if no deal is made, the attacks will continue.
Because of the actions we have taken, we are on the cusp of ending Iran's sinister threat to America and the world. And I'll tell you, the world is watching. And when we do, when it's all over, the United States will be safer, stronger, more prosperous, and greater than it has ever been before.
The 31st Marines Expeditionary Force, a carrier group packing amphibious vehicles, stealth fighter jets, hovercraft, and 2,200 troops.
Move up!
After 2 weeks of flying over Iran, the US now set to walk into it.
Stop, move! Yep.
Pentagon sources saying the USS Tripoli group is heading in from Japan, up to 2 weeks away.
When are you going to know when it's over?
When I feel it.
Okay.
I feel it in my bones.
America insisting victory is near.
Iran's leadership is in no better shape. Desperate and hiding, they've gone underground, cowering. That's what rats do.
But in Tehran, just hours later, the annual Al-Quds parade for Palestinians. Thousands marched despite bombs falling nearby, and among them, Iran's leaders, brazenly flaunting their presence. The president stopping for selfies, the foreign minister staying local, and the justice minister barely flinching in an airstrike. Not looking like a regime under threat, even as the US put a price on their heads, now offering $10 million rewards, including for still unseen Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. 14 days of airstrikes, even drone strikes. But the US has never hit this until now. Iran's crown jewel oil facility, Karg Island, just 8 kilometres long, it handles 90% of exports, vital to Iran's economy. So far, only hitting the island's military infrastructure, but it will rattle world markets too.
War is hell. War is chaos.
Responding to confirmation, all 6 crew were killed in the refueler mid-air collision, the second plane somehow surviving.
American heroes. All of them.
So, 2 weeks in, and this war has fundamentally upended the Middle East. This joint US-Israel operation inflicting consequences no one had predicted. In Beirut, more airstrikes, plus airdrops. Thousands of leaflets from Israel urging residents to fight Hezbollah, with growing talk of an invasion like Gaza. Anxious times too for thousands of Iranian families in Australia.
Are you worried for your parents?
Yes, I'm worried about them.
Bob says his parents have locked down with 2 months' worth of food and prayers for the future.
We are very happy. Not just me, all Iranian happy. We dancing in the street.
But most have their hopes on hold for now.
Live to Chief Reporter Chris Reason in Tel Aviv. Chris, this is a significant escalation of the war.
Sam, it is no official announcement or confirmation yet, but a senior Pentagon official did tell the press today that the orders have been given. It is a significant escalation, both in the duration of the war and the complexity, and so politically risky for Donald Trump and his MAGA base. But if America wants to open up the Strait of Hormuz again, the talk is that they're going to need specialist troops to basically go in and secure that coastline and its beachheads. And the Marines will do that to try and stop the Iranians on those fast boats with their missiles and rockets attacking our tankers and basically causing havoc in the world oil supply and economy, Sam.
Chris Reason, thank you.
This morning, escalation, with thousands more U.S. forces heading to the Middle East, including 2,200 Marines, a quick reaction force aboard 3 Navy amphibious ships. Their deployment coming just days after the president declared victory in this war.
We've won. Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
The tactical success in this war is evident. The U.S. military destroying the majority of Iran's missile launchers, air defenses, and Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets.
With every passing hour, we know, and we know they know, that the military capabilities of their evil regime are crumbling.
But the fight with Iran seems far from over. Its remaining missiles and drones striking throughout the region and taking aim squarely at the world's oil supply. Oil tankers ablaze in the Strait of Hormuz, from which 20% of the world's oil flows. The strait has long been a deep concern. We were on board the U.S. destroyer, the USS Sterett, in 2012, when Iran was threatening then to close down the strait. The shipping lane itself is only about 2 miles wide, so there is very little room to maneuver. That's the massive aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln just behind me. The ship's captain, Richard McDaniel, on high alert in his heavily armed ship.
You want to be always at a max state of readiness to respond to anything.
But now, 16 days into this very real war with Iran, this vital waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea is effectively closed. Satellite imagery showing the rapid decline in the flow of ships and Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, vowing to keep the bloc on the strait as leverage.
They are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with. We have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it.
But there is deep concern. Oil prices this week hitting more than $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022. Surging gas prices in the U.S., now $3.70 a gallon, up 76 cents since the start of the war. The U.S. tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, authorized to release 172 million barrels, part of a coordinated effort with more than 30 countries to stabilize markets. And now, with Iran reportedly laying mines in the strait, the U.S. targeting more than 30 mine-laying Iranian vessels, according to CENTCOM, and launching those air attacks on Karg Island, where 90% of Iran's crude oil is processed. President Trump claiming the bombing totally obliterated every military target as he threatened to wipe out the island's oil infrastructure if Iran continues to block the Strait of Hormuz.
Why is the United States suddenly alone in one of the world's most dangerous crises? Because even its closest allies don't want to enter the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries 1/5 of the world's oil. And right now, it's effectively blocked. Oil prices are rising, global markets are under pressure, and Washington is asking for help. US President Donald Trump has demanded that allies send naval forces to reopen the strait, but instead of support, he got hesitation. Europe's response: caution, delay, resistance. Any mission requires unanimous approval, and countries like Germany are already pushing back. Asia's response: even weaker. Japan and South Korea, two of America's most important partners, have refused to commit ships. And that's despite the fact that Japan gets 95% of its oil from the Middle East. So what's stopping them? Risk. Reopening Hormuz is not just a naval operation. It means sailing directly into a war zone. Iran still has the capability to target ships, launch attacks, and disrupt any escort mission. That makes every vessel, military or civilian, a potential target. And even if allies join, it may not change anything. European officials say additional ships would take weeks to arrive and would add little beyond the massive US naval presence already there. As Germany's defense minister bluntly put it, what can a few European ships achieve that the US Navy cannot? But this isn't just military, it's political. After years of tensions over tariffs, NATO funding, and foreign policy, allies are no longer eager to follow Washington into another conflict. As one analyst warned, the US is now discovering how much goodwill it has burned. Even Britain, America's closest ally, is stepping back. Prime Minister Keir Starmer made it clear the UK will not be dragged into a wider war. Other countries are even more direct. Spain warned against any escalation. Several European governments said they have no plans to send ships at all. And in Asia, the hesitation is even more strategic. Japan and South Korea are wary of supporting a war that has no clear endgame, is not backed by the United Nations, and could pull them into a much larger conflict. Even Australia and New Zealand have stayed non-committal. And then there is China, a major energy power, a key player in the region, but completely unwilling to join a US-led operation, because Beijing has close ties with Iran and no reason to support Washington's war. And that reveals the real problem. This isn't just a military crisis, it's a credibility crisis. The United States is asking for a coalition, but no one wants to sign up, because the risks are high, the strategy is unclear, and the outcome is uncertain. So now the question is no longer, can the US reopen the Strait of Hormuz? The real question is, will it have to do it alone?
Out of mountain bunkers or boats loading mines at port, Allied fighter jets and ship-launched Tomahawk missiles are tasked with destroying them before they can fire a single shot. Hidden deep inside underground bunkers, these Iranian P-15 anti-ship cruise missiles posed a massive threat to international shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. To neutralize the risk, U.S. forces dropped multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator bombs on hardened coastal missile sites. The weapon they used is a GBU-72, a 5,000-pound precision-guided bomb fitted with a JDAM kit. These huge munitions can smash through 160 feet of earth or 20 feet of solid, reinforced concrete. Once they break through, they trigger a massive explosion that completely wipes out the underground structure. And speaking of defensive bunkers, once your personal infos are out there, expect to be bombarded with spam mails, junk calls, and online breaches. This data doesn't just result in spam and scam attempts. It can also affect your insurance rates and ultimately will lead into a loan denial just when you might need credit. Incogni helps protect your privacy by regularly scanning and preventing data brokers from re-uploading your information. You'll also...
What is Washington's 15-point plan to end the war with Iran? Is Trump looking for an exit? And where does Pakistan fit in? Let's answer these questions. The plan is a list of massive demands: a permanent end to nuclear enrichment, the surrender of Iran's 60% uranium stockpile, and the total dismantling of facilities like Natanz and Fordow under strict IAEA access. It also calls for a ballistic missile freeze, an end to proxy support for groups like Hezbollah, and guaranteed passage through the Strait of Hormuz, starting with a 1-month ceasefire. While some points remain secret, experts expect offers of IMF aid and banking reintegration to pull Iran away from de-dollarization. But here's the catch. These are the same red lines that started the war. If Washington already claimed its strikes crippled the program, why the document? It looks like an admission of failure after 4 weeks of intense combat. Also, with Trump now already claiming regime change is done, this looks like a face-saving off-ramp. Iran, however, is playing smart. It flatly denies direct talks with the U.S., keeps up retaliatory strikes, refuses to open the Strait of Hormuz, and isn't buying Trump's 5-day ceasefire bait. It's a high-stakes standoff where neither side wants to look weak. And that's exactly where Pakistan comes in. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has offered to host summit-level talks in Islamabad, while Field Marshal Asim Munir has engaged Washington to help align the path forward, putting Pakistan at the center of this diplomatic push. Can a U.S. ground invasion of Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz? The answer is no. Even with the USS Tripoli and the 31st MEU positioned near Karg Island, a ground invasion would likely keep the strait closed. Understand this. An attack on Tehran's economic heart would trigger a scorched sea response, turning the 21-mile Strait of Hormuz into a permanent dead zone. With shipping lanes just 2 miles wide, sinking a single tanker or laying Maham series mines can block passage, impossible for ground forces to clear quickly. Iran can deploy anti-ship missiles, naval mines, swarm boats, submarines, armed drones, and layered air defenses, creating a deep, overlapping area denial zone. Furthermore, seizing the coastline is futile, as Iran's missile cities remain buried 500 meters deep within the Zagros Mountains. These mobile launchers can rain cruise missiles from 50 miles inland, well beyond the reach of any beachhead. This escalation also activates the Bab-ul-Mandeb trap, where Houthi allies mirror the blockade in the Red Sea, effectively decapitating global energy trade at both ends of the peninsula. Also critically, Iran has already prepared for this scenario with the Jask terminal. By shifting its own exports to the Gulf of Oman, Tehran can bypass the very chaos it creates, ensuring its own survival while the rest of the world remains hostage to a hardened blockade. Ultimately, a ground invasion doesn't reopen the strait. It ensures it remains closed.
We turn now to the Foreign Minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi. Good evening to you, sir.
Well, good evening to you. Thank you for having me for the second time.
Yes, and they are extraordinary times. Minister, President Trump said this weekend he is not ready to make a deal with Iran because the terms aren't good enough yet. His administration is saying this war could last another 3.5 weeks or so. Has Iran asked for a ceasefire?
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, and this is what we have done so far, and we continue to do that until President Trump comes to the point that this is an illegal war with no victory, and there are people being killed only because President Trump wants to have fun. This is what he has said.
Have fun?
We are not. Yes, this is what he said, that they are sinking, ships and targeting different places because it is fun. And the Secretary of War has said that there is no mercy. Mm-hmm. And this is actually a war crime. Even saying that is a war crime. So this is a war. This is a war of choice by President Trump and the United States, and we are going to continue our self-defense.
Well, that may be your position, but sir, this is a war of survival for your government. Minister, don't you have to negotiate and reach out either directly or through a third party?
No, it's not a war of survival. We are stable and strong enough. We are only defending our people from this act of aggression, and we don't see any reason why we should talk with Americans, because we were talking with them when they decided to attack us, and that was for the second time. There is no good experience talking with Americans. We were talking. So why they decided to attack us? So what is good if we go back to talk once again?
Well, I want to come back to that in just a moment. You're referring to the diplomacy with President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his envoy, Steve Witkoff. But just to continue on this, Iran is sending its drones and its missiles into your neighboring countries, American allies throughout the Gulf. Before the war, your government traded with them. You had relations with them. If your government survives this conflict, how do you go back to doing business with countries you're sending drones into and hitting civilian targets?
Well, obviously, these are the countries who have given their soil to American forces to attack us. So what can we do? We just sit and watch that American forces are attacking us from their soil?
But your drones are going into civilian areas and hitting plants and hotels and civilians.
No, this is not the fact. We are only targeting American assets, American installations, American military bases. Everything belongs to Americans. And this is a fact that they are using their soil. There are many, many examples. Just yesterday, they, attacked our islands using HIMARS artillery rockets, which are low-range, rockets, and they used the territory of UAE to attack us. A week ago, 3 F-15 jet fighters were shot down, apparently by a friendly fire in Kuwait, but nobody asked what they were doing in Kuwait. They were using Kuwait and, airspace of a neighborly, a friendly country to attack us. So it is obvious we cannot just, remain,
right. Well, so many of these countries are part of CENTCOM, but this is the point, is that it's going to hurt your country in the long term. But when we talk about the Strait of Hormuz, which is such an important transit point for global trade, you have said it is closed to Israel and it's closed to the United States. The Financial Times is reporting that European diplomats from France and Italy are talking to your government about trying to get safe passage for their ships. Are you open to restarting oil and gas vessels going through there?
Well, we are open to countries who want to talk to us about the safe passage of their vessels.
You are negotiating with France and Italy?
Well, I cannot mention any country in particular, but we have been approached by a number of countries who want to have a safe passage for their vessels, and this is up to our military to decide. And they have already decided to let a group of vessels belongs to different countries to pass in a safe and secure. So we provide them security to pass because we have not closed this strait. They are not coming themselves because of the insecurity which is there because of the aggression by the U.S.
I want to ask you again about the negotiations. Iran has declared it has 440 kilos or so of nuclear material. Where is that material now? Who has custody of it?
Well, we have not declared. This is verified and declared by the agency.
That's right.
This is not a secret. This is not a secret, The agency have said in his many reports the exact amount of our enriched, nuclear material.
Yes. So where is it now? Who has custody of it?
So they are under the rubbles. Our nuclear facilities were attacked, and everything is under the rubbles. Of course, there is the possibility to retreat them, but under the supervision of the agency. If one day we come to the conclusion to do that, it would be under the supervision of the agency. But for the time being, we have no program, we have no plan to recover them from under the rubbles.
Am I understanding you here? Because I know that you said 48 hours before the U.S. strikes happened, you had personally offered to President Trump's negotiators to take that 440 kilo amount of 60% enriched material and to dilute it. You said Iran was ready to give that material away. This was in the deal that was also presented to Vice President Vance by Oman. Today, is Iran still willing to let go of that enriched uranium?
Well, that was one of the elements of a deal that we were negotiating with our, American interlocutors. That element dealt with the question of Iran's 60% enriched material. And I offered actually that we are ready to dilute those enriched material or downblend them, as they say, into lower percentage. So that was a big offer, a big concession, in order to prove that Iran has never wanted nuclear weapons and would never want them.
Are you willing to give that up now?
Well, there is nothing on the table right now. Everything depends on the future. If any time in the future we decide to enter into negotiation with the U.S. or other interlocutors, we may decide what to put on the table. For the time being, nothing is on the table.
There are at least 4 Americans being held at Evin prison that we know of, including a journalist, Reza Valizadeh, and Cameron Hekmati, a 61-year-old man. What is the status of those Americans? Are they safe?
Well, if the U.S. and Israel do not attack our prisons, I guess they are safe.
Foreign Minister, we are running out of time, and I can see the internet is going in and out here. I just do want to point out, you're speaking to us via Zoom. The Iranian people don't have open internet access, but you do. Why?
Well, because I'm the voice of Iranians, and I have to defend their right. So this is why I have access to internet to just have our voice being heard by the international community. But internet is closed because of the security reasons, because we are under attack, we are under aggression, and we have to do everything to protect our people. In any country, there are urgent measures taken for the sake of war.
Minister, I'm glad the uplink worked to talk to you right now. We thank you for your time this morning. Face the Nation will be back in a minute. Stay with us.
Somewhere in the Persian Gulf right now, there is an island. It is 8 kilometers long, 5 kilometers wide. It has no tourist beaches, no famous landmarks, no reason most people on Earth have ever thought about it. And right now, American surveillance drones are circling above it, around the clock. An American ship the size of a skyscraper laid sideways is steaming toward it from Japan. 2,000 American paratroopers just received written orders to deploy to the Middle East. And Iran, which has had this island guarded by its most elite military force for decades, is digging in. This is not about a military base. It's not about a nuclear site. This is about oil, about money, about the single most valuable piece of real estate in the entire Middle East conflict. And in the next few weeks, it may become the most important military operation of the 21st century. Let's break down exactly what is happening and why. 28 days that changed the world. To understand what's about to happen, you need to know the 30 seconds of backstory. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the most intense military campaigns in modern history, targeting Iran's military infrastructure, nuclear sites, and leadership. Within days, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was dead. The Strait of Hormuz, that 21-mile choke point through which 20% of the world's oil moves every day, was effectively closed. Iranian forces mined the waters, attacked tankers, and warned that any ship attempting passage would be struck. Oil prices went from $72 a barrel to $126 a barrel in less than 3 weeks, the largest supply disruption since the 1970s energy crisis. 150 tankers sitting still, billions of dollars of cargo going nowhere. Now, a month into the air campaign, the U.S. has struck over 9,000 targets inside Iran. It has sunk or damaged more than 140 Iranian naval vessels. It has eliminated Iran's ability to manufacture new ballistic missiles. And yet, the strait is still closed. And that is why the strategy just changed. Iran's forbidden island and why the U.S. wants it. Let's talk about the island. Karg Island sits 25 kilometers off Iran's southwestern coast in the northern Persian Gulf, a coral outcrop about 8 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. The Iranians call it the Forbidden Island because access has been tightly restricted and guarded by the IRGC for decades. It was first developed into an oil terminal in the 1960s under the Shah, in partnership with the American oil company Amoco. The engineers who built it recognized something geologically unique about this location. The waters around Karg are deep enough to berth the world's largest supertankers directly alongside the jetties. Most of Iran's coastline is too shallow for VLCCs, very large crude carriers. Karg is the exception. And over 65 years of investment, Iran built it into something extraordinary. Today, the island hosts 55 crude oil storage tanks capable of holding over 34 million barrels, loading terminals designed to handle up to 7 million barrels per day,
though current exports are around 1.6 million. Underwater pipelines running from mainland oil fields hundreds of kilometers away. Capacity to service 8 to 9 supertankers simultaneously. And here's the number that makes Karg the most strategically important real estate in this conflict. 90% of all Iranian crude oil exports flow through this single island. Not most of it, not the majority, 90%. Iran earned $53 billion in net oil export revenue in 2025. Almost all of that money passed through these jetties, through these pipelines, through this island. The IRGC's 112th Zulfiqar Surface Combat Brigade guards it. Fast attack boats, coastal missile batteries, manpads, shoulder-fired anti-aircraft systems, and according to U.S. intelligence reporting, Iran has now been actively laying anti-personnel mines and defensive traps across the island in anticipation of an American operation. The Forbidden Island knows what's coming. America's emergency response force and the engineering of moving it. On Tuesday, March 24th, the Pentagon gave the order. Between 2,000 and 3,000 soldiers from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division, based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, received written deployment orders to the Middle East. And here's where Grand Structures viewers will find this fascinating, because what just happened is a logistics miracle that most people completely miss. The 82nd Airborne's Immediate Response Force, the specific unit now deploying, is a brigade-sized formation of roughly 3,000 soldiers that exists for one single purpose: to be deployable anywhere on Earth within 18 hours. Not 18 days, not 18 weeks, 18 hours. Think about the engineering infrastructure required to make that promise real. The 82nd maintains what military planners call chalks, pre-assigned loads of soldiers and equipment, already matched to specific aircraft, already weighed and configured, that can be called up and loaded in hours. The soldiers maintain go bags. Their equipment is pre-positioned. The airlift, primarily C-17 Globemaster III aircraft, is pre-arranged through Air Mobility Command. Each C-17 can carry about 102 paratroopers with full combat gear, or a mix of soldiers and heavy equipment. Moving 2,000 soldiers requires roughly 20 aircraft sorties, just for the people before you count the weapons, vehicles, ammunition, and communications equipment. This is the 82nd's strength. They travel light. No tanks, no heavy armored vehicles, just paratroopers, weapons, and the ability to land on any airstrip or no airstrip at all. And that's also their limitation, which is exactly why the U.S. is sending something else alongside them. The megastructures the Marines are sailing on. Let me describe a structure to you. It is 261 meters long. That's 856 feet, longer than 2.5 football fields. It weighs 45,000 tons fully loaded. It has a flight deck, hangars below deck, a well deck that floods with water so landing craft can sail out of the back of the ship into the open ocean. It can simultaneously operate as a light aircraft carrier flying F-35B stealth fighter jets
Iran is sending a very clear message to the world. The global economy is now being held hostage, and an absolute zone of risk is emerging in the Gulf that no superpower would dare to breach. However, Iran appears to have made a major mistake, because it has caused Washington to return to the table with the most overwhelming force in history, and this time, with everything it has. They have covered the critical 21-mile-long Strait of Hormuz with a dense network of sea mines hidden beneath the surface. The entire coastline of Karg Island has been laced with deadly booby traps. On the water's surface, explosive-laden suicide boats, ready to detonate at any moment, have begun patrolling. The purpose of this psychological barrier was simple. No global navy would dare to enter this layered and ruthless underwater labyrinth, but Washington did not back down. Instead of merely striking from the air and retreating, it activated a full-scale attack scenario. In fact, the picture emerging on the horizon is far more severe. Massive warships, paratrooper units, F-35s, A-10s, and Apache helicopters are accompanied by tens of thousands of soldiers quietly infiltrating the region. 12 A-10 Thunderbolt II attack aircraft are being transferred from Bangor Air Base to RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, supported by aerial refueling tankers. Moreover, this massive show of force is merely the first breeze of the approaching storm. The Pentagon has already laid out plans for a potential ground operation targeting Iranian territory. According to a shocking report published by the Wall Street Journal on the night of March 26th, the U.S. military is preparing to deploy an additional 10,000 troops to the Middle East under an emergency order. The focal point of the ground operations is the 82nd Division, which arrived in the Middle East last weekend. Hundreds of special operations units, including Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, are also on their way. It is reported that reinforcements for this division will continue to arrive in the region this week, bringing the total personnel count to approximately 3,000. However, the truly alarming reality lies elsewhere. This 10,000-strong reinforcement force, including special forces, is merely the leading wave of the massive tsunami looming on the horizon. Because the Pentagon's true latent capacity is far more massive, there is already a massive American military presence of 50,000 troops, fully equipped from head to toe, deployed in the region. Let's add the reports that the number of Marine and airborne units will also reach 17,000. This amounts to a massive force of nearly 67,000 personnel. But at this point, there is a different nuance we must first pay attention to, because the timing of this striking troop reinforcement, as reported by the WSJ, is quite striking. As you know, Trump suspended attacks against Iran for 10 days. The world interpreted this as a signal of a ceasefire. But right at that moment, the Pentagon announced the decision to deploy 10,000 additional troops. A country seeking to sit at the negotiating table does not deploy tens of thousands of troops to the region. This 10-day period could be a chance for peace, but it could also be the final window for preparations for one of the largest ground operations in the Middle East in history. There is a very clear message behind the Pentagon's move. If diplomacy fails, we are ready to go in. And this preparation isn't just on paper. According to the WSJ, these forces will join U.S. Marines already advancing toward the region. The USS Tripoli amphibious assault ship is currently deployed in the region, carrying the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. But the Tripoli is not alone. The USS Boxer amphibious assault ship is also heading toward the region with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit. On top of that, paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division are joining this military force. You're looking at a combat-ready force with over 7,000 amphibious landing and airborne capabilities. And all of these military units are just a few hours' distance from Iran's coastline. This force is not just about numbers. Every U.S. Marine Corps unit deploys to the field with its own air support, its own armored vehicles, and its own intelligence capabilities. MV-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft can transport hundreds of troops to shore in minutes. CH-53E Super Stallion helicopters can transfer heavy equipment from ship to shore. LCAC hovercrafts, meanwhile, can land armored vehicles directly on the beach. This is one of the most comprehensive amphibious landing preparations in modern military history. So what would this massive U.S. force do if it landed on the battlefield? There is one target on which all military analysts agree: Karg Island. This strategic region is Iran's main oil export terminal in the Persian Gulf. 90% of Iran's crude oil exports flow to the world from this small island. The U.S. has already struck this island as part of Operation Epic Fury. Over 90 military targets were destroyed using B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, F-35s, and Tomahawk cruise missiles. Radar stations, missile silos, command centers, all were leveled. But there is one striking detail. The oil infrastructure was left untouched. Trump stated this clearly: "We showed restraint." However, there is no guarantee that this restraint will continue in the next step. And this is precisely where Iran is not sitting idly by. According to CNN's latest reports, Intensive fortifications have been carried out on Karg Island in recent weeks. Additional air defense systems have been deployed. Coastal defense missile batteries, the College Fars and Hormuz II, have been moved to the island. And perhaps most dangerously, Iran has heavily mined the area around the island. The asymmetric message has begun to become clear in the wake of all this. In fact, military analysts are discussing an even more alarming scenario. Iran may be planning a scorched earth strategy in case it loses the island. That is, a plan to sabotage the oil facilities with their own hands to prevent them from falling into U.S. hands. This is a nightmare scenario for both the U.S. and global energy markets. But Karg isn't Trump's only trump card. Military strategy experts predict that a potential ground operation would be multi-layered. Karg Island is the primary target, but secondary targets are also on the table. These reportedly include geostrategic locations such as Lavan Island, Siri Island, and Keshem Island. Each of these islands is a critical component of Iran's logistical and military infrastructure in the Persian Gulf. Keshem lies directly across from the Strait of Hormuz. Whoever controls this island can control the strait. So, can the U.S. reach these critical points? According to CSIS analyses, the U.S. already possesses the capability for simultaneous amphibious landings on these islands. The MV-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft and CH-53E Super Stallion heavy-lift helicopters aboard the USS Tripoli are platforms specifically designed for this type of rapid island assault. On the first night, Special Operations Forces from Delta Force and the 75th Ranger Regiment have the capability to infiltrate the island by helicopter. They can also approach at low altitude using MH-6 Little Bird and MH-60 Blackhawk helicopters. The cover of darkness is crucial for these units. Under these conditions, we are talking about units capable of reaching the island while evading radar detection. Once Delta Force units reach their designated targets, their mission appears quite clear: to silently neutralize radar stations and missile batteries. This initial strike could be decisive for the fate of the entire operation, because the moment air defense is neutralized, the island's gates open. Then the Marines can step in. Rapid deployment using MV-22 Ospreys can begin. Simultaneous landings can be conducted at multiple locations at the same time. The objective here is to split the defense and isolate resistance points. However, this scenario is not limited to this. The 82nd Airborne Division could enter the scene alongside the Marines. This division could secure critical points by parachuting from C-17 and C-130 transport aircraft. Oil terminals, port facilities, communication centers. All of these are likely among the priority targets. Of course, for ground forces, the Air Force's softening bombardment support is essential for any operation. Therefore, while U.S. Marines and Special Forces carry out a potential amphibious assault, F-35B fighter jets can provide continuous air support. AH-64E Apache attack helicopters can clear resistance points on the ground. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, meanwhile, can jam all of Iran's radar and communication systems. This entire operation could be completed within 24 to 48 hours, provided there are no complications. However, Iran is not unprepared for this scenario. On the contrary, according to CNN reports, Tehran is attempting to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a death trap. Dense minefields have been established at the strait's narrowest point. Iran's fast attack boats are patrolling the strait. Preparations for drone swarms, or swarm attacks, have been completed. And the most critical point, Iran's coastal missile batteries keep every ship passing through the strait within range. If the U.S. launches a ground operation, Iran's first response will likely be to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz completely closed. This means halting the daily flow of 20 million barrels of oil, a full-blown earthquake for global energy markets.
Somewhere in the Persian Gulf right now, there is an island. It is 8 kilometers long, 5 kilometers wide. It has no tourist beaches, no famous landmarks, no reason most people on Earth have ever thought about it. And right now, American surveillance drones are circling above it, around the clock. An American ship the size of a skyscraper laid sideways is steaming toward it from Japan. 2,000 American paratroopers just received written orders to deploy to the Middle East. This assault ship, launching Marines by sea and by air. This is the USS Tripoli, an America-class amphibious assault ship, and it is currently heading toward the Persian Gulf.
ordered out of its home port of Sasebo, Japan on March 13th. The Tripoli transited the Strait of Malacca and was spotted at Diego Garcia in the British Indian Ocean Territory by March 23rd. It is expected to enter the combat zone by late March or early April. Aboard it, approximately 2,200 Marines and sailors of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, the only permanently forward deployed MEU in the Marine Corps. And then there's the second ship, USS Boxer, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, departed San Diego on March 19th, 3 weeks ahead of its originally scheduled deployment. It carries the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, approximately 2,500 Marines and sailors. The Boxer is sailing 22,200 kilometers from California to the Persian Gulf. At current speed, it won't arrive until mid-April. But here's why that matters on the grand structure side of this story. HMEU is essentially a self-contained military city on water. Inside those ships are F-35B Lightning II stealth fighter jets, capable of short takeoff and vertical landing. MV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft, half helicopter, half airplane, for rapid troop insertion. CH-56 Super Stallion heavy lift helicopters. AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters. Amphibious assault vehicles and landing craft air cushion, hovercraft for beach landings. Artillery systems, medical facilities, command centers. The well deck is one of the most extraordinary pieces of naval engineering in existence. The rear of the ship floods with seawater. The ship's ballast is adjusted so the stern sinks and the landing craft literally sail out of the back into the open ocean. From a floating fortress offshore to boots on a hostile beach in minutes. Combined, the 31st and 11th MEUs bring approximately 4,700 Marines into the theater. Add the 82nd Airborne's 2,000 paratroopers, and you have a combined force of roughly 6,500 to 7,000 ground troops converging on the Persian Gulf. The Atlantic Council's Alex Plitzis put it bluntly. That force is not sufficient for a major invasion, nor to hold a single city. It says limited, targeted ops only. And the most discussed limited, targeted operation is the seizure of one specific island.
What if Iran burns its own island? February 1991. As coalition forces push Iraqi troops out of Kuwait, Saddam Hussein orders his soldiers to do something that shocked the world. Burn the oil wells. Not to deny them to an enemy, not as a military tactic with clear strategic value, but as an act of scorched earth spite, destroying Kuwait's economic infrastructure rather than surrendering it intact. 732 oil wells were set on fire. It took 10 months and an international team of firefighters to extinguish them. The environmental disaster was visible from space. Now replace Kuwait's oil wells with Karg Island's 55 storage tanks and loading terminals. If Iran concluded that it was going to lose the island and decided to detonate its own infrastructure rather than surrender it, the consequences would be catastrophic. For Iran, a multi-year economic collapse, the Josk terminal on the Gulf of Oman can handle only a fraction of Karg's volume. There is no replacement. Oil revenues would collapse to near zero for years. For global energy markets, an instant price shock on top of an already crisis-level price environment. For the United States, the bargaining chip vanishes. You hold a burned, toxic, unusable island, and you gain nothing. This is why Trump has thus far deliberately not struck the oil infrastructure, not out of mercy, out of strategic calculation. The island is only valuable if it remains intact. And the moment Iran believes it's truly lost, that calculation flips. The negotiating table no one is sitting at yet. Here's the part of this story that cuts through all the military analysis. The troops, the ships, the island, none of this is the actual goal.
The actual goal is a phone call. Behind the scenes, the U.S. has submitted a 15-point ceasefire proposal to Iran, delivered through Pakistan as an intermediary. The proposal includes demands that Iran commit to never pursuing nuclear weapons and dismantle existing capabilities. Iran initially denied any talks were happening. Then an Iranian source told CNN there was outreach and Iran was willing to listen to sustainable proposals. Meanwhile, Iran's parliament speaker publicly warned that he believes American forces are preparing to occupy an Iranian island. He's not wrong. The convergence of the 82nd Airborne, the 31st MEU, the 11th MEU, and the ongoing air campaign is not necessarily a plan to fight a ground war in Iran. It is a negotiating posture with 6,500 troops in it. The message to Tehran is binary: either come to the table or we take the island. And Iran is calculating whether the U.S. is actually willing to absorb the casualties, the international criticism, and the military risk that seizing Karg would entail. Nobody knows the answer yet. The island that might end a war. 65 years ago, American engineers helped Iran build something extraordinary on a small coral island in the Persian Gulf. A terminal so large that it could service the biggest ships on Earth. A pipeline network that turned a remote island into the financial heartbeat of an entire nation. They built it, they commissioned it, they left. And now, 6 decades later, American paratroopers are loading onto transport planes and American Marines are crossing the Indian Ocean, headed for the same island. What happens on Karg Island in the coming weeks could determine whether this conflict ends at a negotiating table or escalates into something the region hasn't seen in a generation. A 6-kilometer island, the world's oil supply, 2 forces, one dug in, one steaming toward it. The next few weeks will tell us which side blinked. If you want the full background on why the Strait of Hormuz is so impossible to simply take over, we covered the mines, the legal traps, and the history in detail in our last episode. And if you want to understand the aircraft that's providing close air support in this operation, our Ann Black B Spirit episode are right there too.
Right now, as you watch this video, there are over 150 oil tankers sitting still in the ocean. They're not broken, they're not lost, they're waiting. Each one is loaded with millions of barrels of oil. Each one represents hundreds of millions of dollars. Each one has a crew that hasn't seen their families in weeks. And they're all waiting for the same thing: a 21-mile gap in the ocean to stop being a war zone. The Strait of Hormuz. The most powerful military on Earth is right there. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, bombers, special forces. So why can't they just take it over? The answer is one of the most complicated things happening on the planet right now, and it involves geography, history, law, mines, and a mistake the US Navy made that nobody wants to talk about. Let's get into it. The most valuable 21 miles on Earth. Before we answer the question, you need to feel the weight of what this strait actually means, because most people hear oil choke point and just nod. They don't actually feel it. So let me give you the numbers. In 2024, oil flow through the Strait of Hormuz averaged 20 million barrels per day, the equivalent of about 20% of all global petroleum consumption. 20 million barrels every single day through a 21-mile wide gap. But that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is this: more than 1/4 of all global seaborne oil trade passes through that strait, and around 1/5 of global liquefied natural gas trade also moves through it, most of that from Qatar. Now, here's what makes this truly irreplaceable. Only 3.5 to 5.5 million barrels per day can bypass the strait through alternative pipelines. That's it. Everything else, the other 15+ million barrels, has no other way out. There's no plan B. There's no back door. At its narrowest point, the actual shipping lanes used by oil tankers are only a few kilometers across. The biggest ships in the world, the ones that could fill an entire stadium with crude oil, they all have to squeeze through a corridor the width of a small town. And who lives right next to those lanes? Iran controls the north side. Oman controls the south. That geography gives Iran enormous leverage over the strait's security. That's the geography. That's the battlefield. Now, let's answer the question everyone's asking: the false solution and why it fails immediately. Okay, so the US has 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the region. It has destroyers, submarines, and thousands of troops nearby. It has air superiority. It has special forces. So just take it over, right? Here's the first problem with that sentence. Take it over from whom? And then what? The strait isn't a facility. It's not a dam with a single valve you can seize. It's a stretch of open water bordered by hundreds of kilometers of Iranian coastline. Coastline packed with tunnels, caves, hidden missile batteries, drone launch points, small fast boats, and underwater mines. The equipment used in attacks on ships is dispersed in caves, coves, and underground tunnels along hundreds of kilometers of coast, which makes it very difficult to destroy them exclusively from the air. And here's the military reality that even the Pentagon will admit: you can destroy an enemy's navy. You cannot destroy geography. Even if the US sank every single Iranian warship tomorrow, the coastline is still there. The tunnels are still there. The threat is still there. So what does the US actually need to do? And why is it so much harder than it looks? Let's go layer by layer.
A 19th century weapon that's defeating a 21st century navy. Of all the weapons Iran has deployed in this crisis, missiles, drone boats, fast attack craft, the one that is genuinely keeping the US Navy up at night is the oldest and the cheapest: the naval mine. According to the US Defense Intelligence Agency, Iran possessed over 5,000 naval mines capable of rapid deployment via high-speed boats.
And Iran's mines aren't Cold War relics. Open source intelligence assessments have identified modern Iranian mines, including the Maham 3, a moored mine using magnetic and acoustic sensors, and the Maham 7, a seabed limpet-style mine designed to evade sonar detection. These aren't things you see coming. You hear them. Now, here's where the story takes a turn that is almost unbelievable. When Iran started mining the strait in early 2026, the United States needed to sweep them. Simple, right? The U.S. Navy retired its 4 Avenger-class minesweepers from the Persian Gulf in September 2025, just 5 months before Iran began mining the strait. 5 months. The Navy had a plan. They were replacing the old minesweepers with new littoral combat ships, the LCS, fitted with modern mine hunting technology. There was one problem. The 2 LCS ships configured for minesweeping, the USS Tulsa and the USS Santa Barbara, were in Asia when the crisis began. The only minesweeping ships the U.S. had for the Strait of Hormuz were in Asia. And even if they'd been there, littoral combat ships are made of aluminum and cannot enter a mine threat zone the way traditional minesweepers can. They must operate outside the minefield and send unmanned vehicles in instead. So the U.S. is essentially doing mine clearance in a contested, narrow, 21-mile-wide strait using remote-controlled robots, while Iranian missiles and drone boats are a threat too. According to Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy, the best minesweepers in Europe are months away from showing up, while America's more limited resources could clear the strait only over significant numbers of weeks. Weeks with 1,500 tankers waiting, with oil prices spiking toward $120 a barrel, with the global economy grinding. And this mine problem isn't even the deepest layer of why just take over doesn't work. The rule book nobody agreed to and how Iran is using that against us. Here's the part of this story that sounds like a philosophy class, but has very real military consequences. The Strait of Hormuz is governed by international law, specifically by a treaty called UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It's the globing rulebook for what countries can and can't do in international waters. UNCLOS says that international straits, passages used by the world for navigation, cannot be blocked. Ships have what's called right of transit passage, which, in the words of the treaty, shall not be impeded. Clear enough. Iran is blocking it, Iran is in the wrong, case closed. Not quite. Neither Iran nor the United States is a party to UNCLOS. Neither of them signed it. So here's the absurdity. The U.S. is arguing that UNCLOS's transit passage rules have become universal law, binding on Iran even though Iran didn't sign. But if that's true, the same logic binds the U.S. too. The U.S. is essentially invoking a rulebook it also refused to sign. And Iran, it has a counter-argument. Iran argues it's an innocent passage strait, which gives it significantly more control over who passes and on what terms. Iran is essentially rejecting the rules that match the geographic reality of the strait and substituting older rules that happen to suit it better. So you have 2 countries, neither of which signed the treaty, each citing their own legal interpretation of waters they both claim rights to. This legal disagreement between Iran and the United States over which rules actually apply in the strait increases the risk of war. The 2 states disagree on the source as well as the content of the law. And here's the real-world consequence of this legal fog. If the U.S. acts aggressively to open the strait, seizing territory, occupying islands, placing permanent military assets, it becomes the aggressor in the eyes of most of the world. It loses the moral high ground. It loses allies. And in this crisis, losing allies means losing the minesweepers, the coalitions, and the international pressure that might actually solve things. On March 14th, President Trump asked U.S. allies for help to protect ships through the strait. That help has not been forthcoming. Those 7 countries signed a statement saying they supported the possibility of forming a coalition, a gesture short on specifics.
A statement. Not ships, not minesweepers. A statement. Why the most powerful navy in history still can't just sail through. Let's get physical for a second, because even setting aside the law and the mines, the geography itself is a nightmare for any attacking force. The strait is dotted with strategically important Iranian islands, Hormuz, Keshem, and Larak. Also present are the disputed islands of Greater Tanb, Lesser Tanb, and Abu Musa, which lie between the UAE and Iran and provide a commanding vantage point over the Gulf, and have been under Iranian control since 1971. Those islands aren't vacation spots. They're elevated firing platforms sitting right in the middle of the shipping lanes. Missile batteries on those islands can reach anything in the strait. And the coast itself, remember those tunnels and caves we mentioned? Iran's long-standing doctrine is asymmetric naval warfare. Avoid direct confrontation with a superior naval force. Instead of shutting down Hormuz outright, control uncertainty. Enough disruption to wreck global trade, not enough to trigger full-scale war. A single Iranian speedboat carrying 3 mines can be launched from a hidden cave on the coast, drop the mines, and disappear before a satellite even registers the launch. As one naval officer who transited the strait aboard the aircraft carrier USS Constellation wrote, "The narrow geography and proximity of Iranian territory were impossible to ignore." You can have the most powerful carrier in history, but if you're sailing through a corridor 21 miles wide, flanked on one side by a hostile nation's territory, you are in their kill zone, full stop. This is why the strait's geography inherently favors the defender. Even the US acknowledges that winning the air war and winning the sea lanes are 2 entirely different operations, and the second is proving far harder than the first. The 1980s called. They have a warning. Here's the part that keeps military historians awake at night. We have done this before. In 1987, during the Iran-Iraq War, Iranian forces were attacking tankers in the Persian Gulf, the exact same playbook. The U.S. launched Operation Earnest Will, the largest convoy operation since World War II, to escort reflagged Kuwaiti tankers through the Persian Gulf. On July 24, 1987, the very first day of Earnest Will, the reflagged tanker Bridgerton struck an Iranian mine in the central Persian Gulf. The 401,000 deadweight vessel survived the blast, but the incident exposed a humiliating gap. The U.S. Navy had no minesweepers deployed in the Gulf at the time. American warships were forced to follow behind the damaged tanker, using its massive hull as an improvised minesweeper. The world's most powerful navy following a damaged oil tanker because they had no minesweepers. And then, a year later, it got worse. In April 1988, the frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts struck an Iranian mine and nearly sank. The retaliation that followed, Operation Praying Mantis, became one of the most significant naval battles the U.S. Navy has ever fought, including the first missile-to-missile surface battle in U.S. Navy history. The lesson from 1987 was crystal clear. In the Strait of Hormuz, mines are the weapon that equalizes everything. And nearly 40 years later, experts note that circumstances have changed in 2026. Technology has advanced. Iran's arsenal has increased. Cheap drones deployed in sea and sky have expanded the threat matrix. And Iran, its attention is not distracted by a border war with Iraq this time. Iran had 40 years to study 1987, and they prepared accordingly.
This isn't America's problem. It's everyone's problem. Let's talk about who actually gets hurt if the strait stays closed. Because here's where the answer to why doesn't the U.S. just fix it gets genuinely complicated. In 2024,
84% of the crude oil and condensate moving through the Strait of Hormuz went to Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea were the top destinations, accounting for a combined 69% of all Hormuz crude flows. The U.S.? The United States imported about 0.5 million barrels per day through the strait, accounting for about 2% of U.S. petroleum consumption. 2%. So, the country doing the most to open the strait is the country that needs it least, and the countries that need it most are mostly sitting on the sidelines. China imports as much as 40% of its oil and 30% of its LNG through the strait. Beijing has publicly urged all parties to keep it open, while Chinese-flagged vessels have all but ceased transits, leaving dozens of Chinese ships trapped in the Persian Gulf. China has more economic leverage over Iran than any country on Earth, and yet, even Beijing's calls to keep the strait open have had little effect. China's outsized reliance on Hormuz has not translated into meaningful ability to shape events there. And then there are the cascading effects nobody talks about.
There are the cascading effects nobody talks about. Disruption to the strait also impacts global fertilizer production. The Persian Gulf is one of the world's major suppliers of urea fertilizer used in farming worldwide. A shortage of fertilizer leads to reduced crop yields and, eventually, higher food prices for ordinary people who have never heard of the Strait of Hormuz. This is why just take it over isn't just militarily complicated, it's diplomatically impossible without building a coalition that includes countries with far more skin in the game than America has. The three-phase plan, and why Phase 2 is the hard part. So, with all these obstacles, what is the actual plan? According to reporting, the Pentagon's plan consists of 3 stages. First, destroy Iranian military installations that pose a threat to navigation: boats, missiles, drones, mine layers. Aviation plays the main role. Second, check the strait for mines. Clear them. Third, once the threat is reduced enough, begin escorting tankers through as a convoy. Phase 1 is going relatively well. The U.S. Navy has destroyed more than 30 Iranian mine-laying vessels, sunk IRGC warships, and established air superiority over the Persian Gulf. Phase 2 is where it stalls. Because you can destroy a mine layer, you cannot unlay a mine by bombing it. You have to find every single one in murky, debris-filled water in an active war zone and neutralize it individually. The U.S. Navy acknowledges that its new littoral combat ships will always struggle to achieve the same level of mine countermeasure proficiency as dedicated minesweepers. It remains to be seen whether the combination of LCS, helicopters, explosive ordnance disposal, and reportedly Navy-trained dolphins with natural sonar capability can fill the gap left behind by the departed minesweepers. Dolphins. The U.S. Navy may rely partly on trained dolphins to find Iranian mines in the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a joke. This is 2026. Phase 3, escorting tankers, hasn't started yet. The U.S. Navy has been refusing near-daily requests from the shipping industry to escort ships, saying that risks of attacks are still too high. So, right now, the most powerful navy in the world is in a holding pattern, doing the slow, meticulous, unglamorous work of mine hunting, while the global economy bleeds.
You can win a battle. You cannot win a strait. Here's the honest answer to the question in our title. The U.S. can't just take over the Strait of Hormuz, not because of lack of power, but because of a fundamental misunderstanding of what the strait is. The strait is not a facility. It's not a port. It's not a bridge you can seize and hold. It's a geographic fact. It exists between 2 countries. One of those countries, Iran, will continue to exist regardless of what happens in this conflict. Their coastline will still be there. Their islands will still be there. Their ability to make the strait dangerous will still be there, even if you destroy every asset they have today, because they can rebuild, restock, and redeploy. The strait has been a focal point of geopolitical tension repeatedly. In the 1980s tanker war, attacks damaged or destroyed more than 500 vessels. The lesson of every single episode is the same. You can temporarily restore access. You cannot permanently own geography. The real answer to keeping the strait open long-term was never military. It was always diplomatic, reducing the conditions that make Iran want to use the strait as a weapon in the first place. And that's a problem that no carrier strike group, no minesweeper, and no special forces unit can solve. The 21 miles that hold the world. Those 150 tankers sitting outside the strait right now, they're not just ships, they're a measure. A measure of how much of the world's functioning depends on a 21-mile stretch of water. A measure of how a geography that formed millions of years ago can, in 2026, determine whether people in Tokyo pay $4 or $12 for a liter of petrol, whether a farmer in India can afford fertilizer, whether a hospital in Seoul gets its fuel delivery. The Strait of Hormuz doesn't care about treaties.
It doesn't care about carrier strike groups. It doesn't care about presidential announcements. It just exists, and the whole world has to deal with that fact. The question was, why can't the U.S. just take over the Strait of Hormuz? The answer, as you now know, is that geography, law, mines, history, and geopolitics have created a problem that raw military power alone was never designed to solve. And right now, the world is learning that lesson in real time. If you want to understand the full picture of what's happening in the Gulf right now, our episode on the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber covers the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities that...
This is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's strategy here is simple. Choke off this incredibly narrow passage. It's a massive bottleneck where giant oil tankers are squeezed into just two tight shipping lanes, one for ships going in and one for ships coming out. They currently control 3 major islands positioned right along these corridors. Hidden deep inside them is a menacing network of underground bunkers and anti-ship missiles. So why is it so difficult for the US to secure and clear the strait? While the IRGC doesn't use ships but small boats launch in a 360-degree swarm attacks, the strategy is to take the bridges of larger ships. To make things even more complicated, the US military would have to hunt down in those islands for each and every one of those underground bunkers using massive 5,000-pound bunker buster weapons. Take a look at the Middle East. This is how Iran is managing to block 20% of the world's oil transport. What's crazy is that major players like the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and even Iran itself all rely entirely on this one narrow corridor. First, let's look at the choke point. At its narrowest, the strait is only about 39 kilometers or 21 nautical miles wide. This northern coastline belongs to Iran and is highly mountainous. This provides natural camouflage and deep, fortified bunkers for missile launchers. Plus, Iran controls a string of islands like Qeshm, Larak, and Abu Musa. Think of these not as islands, but as heavily armed, stationary small anti-missiles defense system parked right on the edge of the shipping routes. And those routes, they are incredibly tight. Because the waters are shallow and filled with reefs, supertankers are confined to a strict traffic separation scheme. You have one 2-mile wide inbound lane, one 2-mile wide outbound lane, and a 2-mile buffer zone in between. If attacked, these massive cargo ships have virtually zero room to maneuver. But what are the tactics and strategy Iran used to control this narrow corridor? To block the Strait of Hormuz, you have to control the islands. And the IRGC relies on a triad of fortified outposts, each with a very specific and very deadly role. Here's strategy number 1, the Larak Island. Think of this as the choke point enforcer. Larak sits right at the throat of the strait, looming directly over international shipping lanes. The strategy here is all about close quarters intimidation. Because it's right on top of the transit corridor, IRGC fast attack boats staged here can reach a passing cargo ship in mere minutes. For the crew, they have zero time to react. Larak enforces strict no-move zones. Drones launch to monitor stationary tankers while speedboats physically surround them. If a captain decides to start their engines, they open fire. Then comes number 2, the Qeshm Island, the heavy arsenal. If Larak is a knife at the throat, Qeshm is the sledgehammer. It's the largest island in the Persian Gulf and serves as the IRGC's primary military hub. Its rugged mountainous terrain hides a labyrinth of underground bunkers and mobile anti-ship missile launchers. Qeshm is designed to launch heavy anti-ship missiles like the P-15 Hermit. Packed with drone bases and radar installations, it is the strategic anchor of Iran's coastal defense. Then comes number 3, the attack point, Abu Musa, or the forward outpost. Located further south right on the doorstep of rival Arab states, Abu Musa is a heavily fortified early warning center. It extends Iran's anti-access or area denial bubble deep into the Gulf. Radars here track incoming Allied warships and cargo vessels long before they reach the choke point. It's a launch pad that drastically widens the threat zone. So how did they attack the cargo ship? First, Iran will launch the fast attack swarm. The IRGC deploys fleets of small, radar-evading speedboats clocking in at 50 to 70 knots. 10 to 20 of these boats will swarm a single cargo ship from 360 degrees. They zip in close, targeting weak points with heavy machine guns and shoulder-fired missiles. They aim for the bridge to blind the ship, and the engine room to leave it dead in the water. Hidden within this chaos are unmanned suicide vessels, remote-controlled drone boats packed with explosives, steered directly into the hull to blow a massive hole at the waterline. And while the crew is completely overwhelmed, other boats rapidly drop tethered naval mines directly into the ship's path. Stop the ship or risk snapping your keel in half. Then comes the second tactics, anti-ship missiles. If the swarm doesn't get you, the missiles will. Fired from highly mobile trucks that immediately retreat into fortified caves, coastal defense cruise missiles, like the Nor or Gator, employ a deadly trick. But the West isn't exactly defenseless. When Allied warships enter the strait to escort cargo ships, they form a high-tech defensive bubble. Here's how they counter the IRGC's Triad the mines. Navies deploy literal combat ships and specialized mine countermeasure vessels. Using high-frequency towed sonars, underwater drones, and Sea Hawk helicopters, they scan the water ahead of the convoy, detonating mines before the cargo ships ever arrive. But how do you counter the anti-ship missiles? Allied destroyers rely on advanced networks like the U.S. Aegis combat system. The exact moment an Iranian missile is launched, a destroyer's radar tracks it and fires interceptor missiles like the SM-2 or SM-6, blowing the threat out of the sky mid-air. Meanwhile, Apache and Sea Hawk helicopters pick off swarm boats from the air using Hellfire missiles. But at the end of the day, the ultimate countermeasure isn't defense. It's offense. The US and its allies keep an armada of surveillance drones monitoring the Iranian coastline in real time. If they detect
Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. The war in America, United States versus Iran. You've seen it. We broke it down. We package up and ship it out accordingly. The bottom line is, will Donald Trump and the United States take over Straits of Hormuz? We will find out tomorrow. We most definitely will break it down and repackage it up. More info comes out, you know what we're going to do. You know we're going to go live. We're going to break it down. We're going to watch it. It's exactly what we're going to do. The question is, will Donald Trump go WWE on Iran tomorrow? Smash that like button. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. You know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. I'm out. Peace.